A dying Mustang.
A predator bares its teeth.
And then, the world falls out of its natural orbit.
No rules of survival. No boundaries between hunter and prey.
Only two souls,
Struggling between life and death.
and in the moment when fate seemed sealed, an unimaginable choice is made.
No one understands. No one believes.
A monumental betrayal of nature, that even the hardest hearts can't hold back tears. You are about to step into a story
Where instinct no longer hides behind its perfect shell.
and compassion can overturn the ancient laws of the wild. But remember, when everything is said and done, you'll have to ask yourself, are there fates worth betraying your very self for? Join us at Gallop of Glory as we explore this heart-pounding story right now. A cold wind blew through High Hollow Basin, carrying thin white dust clouds into the air, as if a part of the memory had been erased from this world. Veyra stood there, a lone wolf, staring into the distance, where the silent snow-capped mountains lay. These mountains, like herself, had never changed, harsh and cold, like a testament to years that would never fade. Beneath the gray sky, Veyra sighed. Not from exhaustion, but from emptiness. A void so vast inside her that no force could fill it. Her silver-gray fur shimmered in the faint sunlight, her sharp eyes fixed ahead, as though seeing nothing but a mist of sorrow. Veyra was not an evil wolf. She was not a predator who delighted in the hunt, nor a monster lurking in the shadows, waiting for the chance to strike. She was simply a creature, like any other in nature, surviving, existing. But something had changed in her life, something that no one could understand, and something she had never been able to explain. Veyra had once had a pack, a family. Those were the days when, with her pack, Veyra lived in perfect harmony, listening to the winds, the howls of the wolves echoing across the distant mountains. But then, everything changed on one dark night, when humans appeared. It was a group of hunters on horseback, men with nothing but brutality in their hearts. Veyra still remembered it vividly, as if that scene had just happened yesterday. She could feel the thunderous sound of hooves on the ground, a foreboding omen of the impending storm. As the hunters drew closer, Veyra knew what was about to happen. But this time, things were different. The pack had been surrounded, there was no escape. It was a massacre. They had no chance. The painful cries, the whimpers of injured wolves, and the sighs of creatures being pushed to the brink of death. Veyra saw it all. She saw the members of her pack, one by one, fall beneath the cold hands of the hunters on horseback. She tried to fight, to protect her pack, but it was too late. By the time Veyra managed to act, all that remained were cold, lifeless bodies, the corpses of wolves torn apart without mercy. And Veyra, the only surviving wolf, had witnessed an unimaginable tragedy. Humans had taken everything Veyra loved. Veyra ran in panic. But no matter where she ran, she couldn't escape the wounds left by humanity. The wound wasn't just physical, but a wound to her very soul, a wound that no one could heal. After that night, Veyra had no pack left. She did not seek a new one. She didn't seek companionship anymore. The world had been too cruel, and that lone wolf had learned the greatest lesson of her life. No one will save you, no one will stand beside you in your most dangerous moments. So, she chose to live alone, in this world of cruelty. The days of solitude passed, and Veyra became a grim legend in High Hollow. No one ever heard the wolves howl anymore. The people living in the area only heard the cold, biting winds and the suffocating silence. But no one knew that in the darkness of this wild world, Veyra existed, still alive, still fighting, but without any belief in a better world. Veyra was no longer the savage wolf she once was. She was the wolf betrayed. And yet, she still continued to live, searching for some purpose, some reason to exist in a world that would never understand her. There was only one thing that Veyra knew for sure. Don't trust your instincts, because sometimes those instincts can distort everything you once believed. Veyra no longer sought a pack. She had learned to live in solitude, no longer wanting anyone by her side. The death of her pack had not only cost her family, it had also cost her trust in the creatures she once shared this world with. She chose to live alone, without companions, without anyone, in the vast emptiness of High Hollow Basin. And all that remained was the cold, the solitude, and an unanswered question: can I live without anyone beside me? Veyra had become a legend, but a legend of gloom. And until Rowan appeared in her life, Veyra never thought she would have to face another choice, a choice she could not explain. Those were the years of Veyra, living in the shadows of the past, but now ready to face something it had never imagined would happen. The snowstorm arrived swiftly, carrying with it fierce winds and dense layers of snow. Rowan, a 2-week-old Mustang Foal, could feel the fear in every breath. The sky darkened, cloaking the entire High Hollow Basin. Not a single ray of light pierced through the thick clouds, and the only sound was the shrill howling of the wind through the rocks. In these early days of life, the young foal had never faced the brutality of nature in such a way. Marla, Rowan's mother, led the small herd of horses across the snow-covered fields. The horses, with their strong legs and instinct for survival, struggled to escape the deadly storm that had swept in. But for Rowan, still far too small and weak, the blizzard wreaked havoc with no mercy. The foal's unsteady, faltering steps soon grew out of sync with the powerful strides of the herd. The soft coat of Marla, dusted with snow, couldn't help Rowan escape what the storm had brought. The larger horses charged ahead, but Rowan could not keep up. In a moment of chaos, when every creature in the herd scrambled to flee, Rowan was left behind. Amidst the thick snowfall, no one noticed the disappearance of Rowan. Everything had turned into a nightmarish blur. The herd cared about one thing only: survival. Rowan couldn't comprehend it. All it knew was that, in that moment, when its tiny legs were no longer strong enough to run, something had severed the bond between it and the herd. It heard the wind, the cries, and then all was silent. And all that was left was the overwhelming cold. The foal couldn't stand. As the sounds of the storm faded away, all that remained was a deathly stillness. Rowan lay there, buried in the snow, unable to move. Its vision faded, and consciousness slowly slipped away. At that moment, Rowan felt something unique on its forehead. It wasn't a wound or a painful sensation. It was the mark of a crescent moon, a sacred sign that had existed through generations. According to the local legends of the High Hollow Basin, this mark was not a symbol of luck or misfortune, but a sacred symbol, marking the start of a life destined to change the world around it. The crescent moon wasn't just a part of Rowan's body, it was a part of a story that no one in the natural world had ever heard. Though weakened, Rowan still sensed a strange feeling coming from the mark. It felt connected to something greater, something beyond life and death. A connection to the wild world, a thread of fate that no one could explain. Rowan didn't know that, at that moment, another creature, a solitary wolf named Veyra, was wandering through this land, witnessing everything that had happened. Now, standing amidst the cold fury of the blizzard and the harshness of nature, Rowan had only one choice: to die or to fight for survival. With no strength left, no hope, there remained only the one instinct, the will to live. But amidst all this, Rowan could not yet understand one important thing. A new life had begun, and it would change everything. What did the crescent moon mark on Rowan's forehead mean? Where would it lead? Could it be that this mark would make Rowan a part of a story no one would dare believe? These were questions Rowan couldn't answer at that moment. The snowstorm continued to ravage, but now, the young foal was facing the unimaginable, a fateful encounter, not with the herd, but with a creature who had lost faith in everything, a lone wolf named Veyra. Veyra stood at the edge of the ravine, the dim light of the setting sun casting shadows across her silvery gray fur, creating a sharp, cold silhouette against the white snow. Her eyes were keen, locked onto the small creature lying motionless on the ground, Rowan, the Mustang Foal she was now staring at. This moment seemed to freeze time. Everything around her faded into the background. The wind howled through the cracks in the rocks, but in that moment, there were only two beings in an empty universe. Veyra couldn't help but feel the fragility of Rowan. Its tiny, frail body, with its wounded legs, could not stand. Rowan's eyes were fading, but there was still a faint glimmer of light, a spark of hope rising amidst the despair. Veyra took slow, heavy steps, moving closer to Rowan. As a wolf, she had been taught that the world operated on one simple rule: survival of the fittest. Every day was a merciless struggle. The strong live, the weak are consumed. Veyra had lived her entire life by that principle. Every prey, regardless of its kind, was meant to become food for her survival. But as she neared Rowan, something unfamiliar seemed to halt all of Veyra's senses. She noticed something in Rowan's eyes, absolute fear, but also hope, a hope that only creatures who had never known the darkness of the wild could carry. Rowan gasped, calling out for its mother. Its voice was weak, but it still echoed in the stillness of the air. A cry of desperation, not from the fear of death, but from the desire to be saved, even if that might never happen. Veyra stopped. She froze in her tracks, her eyes never leaving the foal. An unexplainable sensation flooded her mind. She no longer felt the hunger for blood, no longer felt the urge to strike down her prey. Memories surged. The images of Veyra's own lost cubs, the pups she had lost in a battle with humans, surfaced in her mind. The helpless, fragile creatures that Veyra had failed to protect, taken brutally by the horsemen, just like Rowan now, weak and abandoned. A strange feeling rose inside Veyra. The memories of the past stirred something deep within her. Veyra's lost cubs, could they see her now, standing before another fragile life? Could they forgive her for not protecting them? Rowan, though prey, seemed to be just like the pups Veyra had lost. An invisible bond tied Veyra's heart to this small foal, one she couldn't ignore. Veyra lowered her head, not to bite or kill, but to lick the wound on Rowan's leg, the injury that had left it barely able to move. The warm liquid from her tongue gently swept across the wound, clearing away the clotting blood and the snow that had settled. This was not the natural act of a predator. Veyra couldn't understand her own actions. This wasn't care, it was a betrayal of instinct, a betrayal so powerful that Veyra felt as if she were being torn apart. She didn't kill. She bowed her head to heal Rowan. Veyra understood that she was no longer just a predator. She didn't live just to kill and eat, and now, this choice had changed everything. Rowan wasn't prey, it was a life equal in value to her own. But at that moment, as Veyra lowered her head to lick Rowan's wounds, a blanket of silence fell between them. Veyra, the fierce and independent wolf, was betraying her very nature, to tend to a foal. Perhaps Veyra's instincts had truly been defeated, when it chose to save a life instead of ending it. The night fell quickly over High Hollow Basin, shrouding everything in a cold, unyielding darkness. The storm had passed, but the frosty breath of the mountains still hung in the air, biting at the skin, as if the land itself had grown weary of the struggle. The wind howled through the valley, swirling around the jagged peaks, whispering the ancient tales of the wild. Veyra stood over Rowan, her silver-gray fur now glistening under the pale light of the moon. The wolf's body was strong and resilient, built to endure the harshest conditions the world could offer. But even the might of the wolf could not fight the biting cold that was sweeping across the land. Rowan, the foal, lay on the snow-covered ground, its small body trembling violently. Veyra could feel it, the weight of the night pressing down on them. The desperation in the air was almost palpable, the same sense of dread that comes when life hangs by a thread. But Veyra wasn't ready to give up, not yet. She wasn't sure why, but something about this small creature, so weak and vulnerable, was calling to her, something deeper than mere instinct. She lay down beside Rowan, positioning herself so her thick fur was wrapped around the foal's fragile body. The warmth from her body would be the only barrier between Rowan and the bitter cold that threatened to consume it. Rowan, exhausted and broken, could barely lift its head. The foal's legs, badly injured from the fall, were stiff and numb, refusing to cooperate with the rest of its body. Its breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, the pain too much for such a young creature to bear. The foal tried to move, faintly shifting its limbs, but each time it did, it crumpled back into the snow. The strength just wasn't there anymore, and the cold seeped deeper into its bones, tightening like a vice around its fragile form. Veyra watched quietly, her amber eyes softening as she observed the struggles of Rowan. The wild instincts that had governed her life for so long now seemed foreign to her. She had always been a hunter, a predator who took what she needed from the land. But now, she found herself playing a new role, a protector. The wolf's body was built to survive, to endure harsh conditions, and now, for the first time, she felt a surge of compassion that went against everything she had ever known. Rowan was not prey. It wasn't just an animal that had to be consumed to fuel her survival. It was a creature, a living, breathing life that deserved to live, even if it meant abandoning her very nature. The foal's breath grew weaker, the fight for survival waning with each passing second. Veyra moved closer, her body molding around Rowan's shivering frame. She leaned in, nudging the foal gently with her head, trying to share whatever warmth she had left. With each soft touch, a new bond seemed to form between them, something not born from hunger or violence, but from something more delicate, more fragile, mutual survival. Veyra couldn't explain it, but there was no other way to describe it. They were both fighting the same enemy, the harsh cold, the unforgiving night, and the very nature that had set them against each other in the first place. Rowan's small body twitched, its legs trembling as it tried once more to rise. The foal's movements were slow, labored, and ultimately futile. It collapsed again into the snow, too weak to continue. Veyra could feel Rowan's heartbeat flutter beneath her, a weak and irregular pulse that threatened to give way to the inevitable. But she refused to give in, not yet. Rowan still had a chance to survive the night, a chance to feel the warmth of the sun on its back again. The wolf breathed deeply, her chest rising and falling with steady resolve. For the first time in her life, the warmth of the foal's body pressed against hers was more important than any kill. For the first time, she found herself thinking about something beyond survival, about compassion. She wasn't just a predator anymore. She had become a witness to something bigger than herself. As the hours dragged on, the cold grew harsher. The wind howled louder, like a song of death waiting for its final note. But Veyra remained there, protecting Rowan, staying close. She would fight the night for this foal. Rowan, still fragile and trembling, occasionally raised its head, its weak limbs trembling with effort. The foal's eyes flickered in and out of focus, but each time it looked up, it found Veyra there, a lifeline, though silent, still providing warmth and safety. Veyra's mind drifted back to those long-ago days, when she had been part of a pack. She remembered how it felt to have others beside her, to share the burden of survival. But that was a lifetime ago. And now, in the deep of the night, she was once again alone, but this time, she wasn't the only one. For a fleeting moment, it wasn't just about survival. It was about connection. And in that silence, as the snow continued to fall, both Veyra and Rowan fought against the bitter cold, against the night, and against their pasts. One was a predator, the other a prey. Yet, together, they fought the cold. Together, they fought to live. The morning light struggled to break through the heavy clouds that still lingered over the high hollow basin. The storm had passed, but its remnants clung to the land, the biting cold, the thick fog that wrapped the earth in an eerie silence. The air was still, but the ground was littered with the scars of the night, the broken, frozen earth and the muffled echoes of a world still shaking off the storm. Veyra remained close to Rowan, her body still pressed against the folds, offering what little warmth she could. Rowan's breathing had steadied slightly overnight, though the small creature remained weak, barely able to lift its head. But this fleeting peace would not last. The air was charged with a different kind of tension now. A sharp, familiar scent cut through the fog, the scent of blood. Veyra's instincts flared. Her amber eyes narrowed, and she stood, her ears twitching as the wind carried the scent farther into the basin. She lifted her head, scenting the air again. There was no mistaking it. Other wolves were near. Wolves that were not part of her pack. Veyra's eyes shifted to Rowan, still lying on the ground, too weak to stand. A protective growl rumbled low in her throat as she began to move in the direction of the approaching threat. The wolves were closing in. Veyra knew they had smelled the blood from Rowan's wounds, just as she had. The wild didn't forgive weakness. Predators would seek out easy prey, and the foal, still injured and vulnerable, was an easy target. Veyra, however, was not going to let that happen. Not again. She had already lost too much. The ground beneath her paws seemed to tremble as the first of the intruder wolves stepped into view, large, shadowy figures emerging from the fog. Their eyes gleamed with hunger, and their body language was calculated, deliberate. They weren't just hunting, they were preparing to take down their prey. Veyra stood tall, her body a tense line of muscle, every fiber in her being primed for what was coming. She took a deep breath, and then, with a snarl, she charged forward to meet them. The battle was brief, but brutal. Veyra lunged at the first wolf that approached, her sharp teeth sinking into its flank. She heard a growl in response, a sound of pain and fury, but there was no time to savor the strike. The others were already circling, trying to outflank her. She was outnumbered, but Veyra was not a stranger to combat. Her strength and ferocity were unmatched, honed over years of surviving alone in the wilderness. She fought back with everything she had, her powerful jaws snapping, claws slashing through the air. But despite her skill, the wolves pressed on, forcing her back step by step. The first wound came swiftly, a bite to her shoulder, tearing through the fur and muscle. The pain was immediate, a searing burn that threatened to weaken her resolve. But Veyra wasn't going to stop. She couldn't. Rowan, the small foal she had chosen to protect, lay helpless on the ground, vulnerable to these attackers. Veyra's heart raced, the need to protect the helpless creature consuming her every thought. A sharp cry of pain from one of the wolves reminded her of the urgency. She twisted and lunged again, sinking her teeth into the throat of the nearest wolf, and with a final, ferocious twist, she sent it sprawling into the snow, blood spilling from the wound. But more wolves came. The pack was large, and Veyra was tiring. She could feel the strain on her body, the ache from the wounds, the loss of blood. Her vision blurred, and each breath became heavier. Another wolf lunged, its claws raking across her side. The force of the strike sent her reeling back, stumbling into the snow. The world spun for a moment, and the cold gripped her chest like a vice. But she couldn't stop. Not yet. With a final snarl, Veyra fought back. She sank her teeth into the shoulder of the wolf closest to her, biting deep enough to hear it cry out in pain. She managed to throw the creature off, but it was clear she was losing strength. Then, in the midst of the chaos, the wolves stopped. The pack hesitated, sensing something had shifted in the battle. The largest of the wolves, a heavy-set male with dark fur, took a cautious step back, his ears flattening against his skull. Veyra's chest heaved, her body battered and bloodied, but she stood her ground. She was exhausted, but she wasn't going to back down. The leader of the pack looked at her, a look that almost seemed to calculate. Then, in a move that stunned Veyra, the pack began to pull back, slowly retreating into the mist. Veyra stood still, her body trembling, not just from the physical pain, but from the adrenaline that coursed through her veins. She had survived. Just barely. She watched as the pack disappeared into the fog, their howls fading into the distance. It was over. For now. But the victory came at a great cost. Veyra's body was sore, covered in wounds, her breath ragged. Her vision blurred, but she couldn't afford to collapse. Not yet. Not until she knew Rowan was safe. She limped back toward the foal, her paws heavy on the snow. She glanced down at the small creature, still lying in the snow, breathing shallowly but alive. Veyra crouched next to Rowan, curling her body around it, offering the last of her warmth. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the stillness wash over her, knowing this was only the beginning of the journey ahead. The wolves were gone, but the dangers were far from over. The wind had calmed somewhat, but the cold still gnawed at the bones of the world. The storm had passed, but its remnants lingered in the frosty air. The landscape of High Hollow Basin was still caught in a frozen grip, the mountains silent and unforgiving. Veyra stood at the edge of the ravine, her body bruised, battered, but not broken. Beside her, Rowan was weak, far too weak. The little Mustang Foal stumbled, struggling to stay on its feet. Its legs, still trembling from the battle the night before, refused to carry it more than a few paces without collapsing. The journey back was long, too long for a young foal that had already endured so much. But Veyra was determined. She had seen the foal survive the worst of the night. She couldn't allow that to be in vain. Veyra took a slow, deliberate step forward, her paws crunching softly in the snow. Her eyes darted back to Rowan, who was struggling to move. She lowered her head, nudging Rowan gently with her nose, urging it forward. The path ahead was treacherous, the narrow ravine, the jagged cliffs, the icy winds that threatened to drag them both back into the depths. But Veyra had known harsh terrains, had fought through winters far colder than this one. Yet now, with every step, she felt her strength draining. Her muscles were sore, her breath ragged from exhaustion. Rowan's progress was slow, painfully slow. Each attempt to rise was met with weakness. Each time the foal tried to push forward, it would stumble, then collapse back into the snow. Veyra's heart clenched at the sight. She couldn't carry the foal, she wasn't strong enough for that. But she would stay with it. She wouldn't leave it behind like she had once left her pack behind. She was done with being alone. With every step, the weight of the journey grew heavier. Veyra's body was already reaching its limits, the wounds from the previous fight still fresh, her side burning with every movement. But she couldn't stop. Not now. She moved slowly, deliberately, keeping an eye on Rowan, whose struggles were growing more frequent, more desperate. Each time it fell, Veyra stayed close, nuzzling the foal with her nose, giving it the strength she no longer had herself. There were no words to offer comfort, no gestures of kindness that could take the edge off the fear and pain both of them were feeling. Instead, Veyra pushed on, leading Rowan away from the ravine's dangerous edges, guiding it toward the open fields where the herd had been before, where safety was just beyond reach. But it felt far away, as if it was a dream neither of them could touch. As the hours dragged on, the weight of the cold seemed to double with each step. Veyra was so tired she could hardly feel her paws anymore. Every part of her body ached, the snow beneath her paws becoming more difficult to traverse, the air sharper with each inhale. Rowan, too, was struggling, its small frame almost consumed by the harsh environment. The foal's hooves left faint marks in the snow, but it seemed as though every movement drained what little strength it had left. Veyra glanced down at the foal, whose eyes were half-lidded with exhaustion, but still holding on. She couldn't stop. Not until she knew Rowan was safe. Her own pain didn't matter. Minutes turned into hours. The bleak landscape stretched out endlessly before them, each step feeling like it would be the last. The journey back to the herd seemed endless. The faint silhouette of the distant mountains that marked the location of the herd's grazing grounds were barely visible through the fog, like a distant promise that seemed to slip farther and farther away with every step. Veyra could feel her energy draining away. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest, but the silence of the land was unbearable. Rowan still needed her. Veyra stopped and turned back toward Rowan once more, watching the foal struggle to stand again. Its small legs buckled beneath it as it tried to rise. With a low, mournful growl, Veyra went to it, nudging the foal upright once again. This time, she stayed beside it, letting Rowan lean against her. The wolf and the foal, both battered and exhausted, moved together through the snow. And just as the cold was threatening to take them both, a flicker of movement caught Veyra's attention in the distance. A figure, faint but recognizable. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized what it was, the herd. The distant shadows of the wild mustangs in the valley below. It wasn't much farther now. Veyra's pace quickened, though her legs felt like they were made of stone. Rowan struggled to keep up, but the sight of the herd was enough to stir a new surge of energy within the foal. For a moment, Rowan found the strength to push forward, its legs carrying it a little farther with each step. They had made it. But the journey wasn't over. The field where the herd waited was still far, still distant, but it was within reach now. Veyra could feel it. Her pace quickened again, the light of the distant herd driving her on. Rowan's breaths were shallow, weak, but the foal still kept moving, inching forward with every step. As the open field stretched before them, Veyra took one last look at the ravine they had just escaped. The dangerous cliffs, the narrow spaces, the unrelenting cold, it was all behind them now. Ahead, there was only one thing left to do, reach the herd and hope Rowan could survive another day. With a last push, Veyra and Rowan broke into the open field, their vision clouded by the mists that rolled over the snow. But they were closer, so much closer than they had been just hours ago. Safety was within their grasp. The early morning light bathed the high hollow basin in a soft, golden glow, as the mist lifted slowly from the snowy fields. The day was quiet, too quiet, with only the faint sound of wind whispering through the jagged peaks. The world seemed frozen, suspended in time, and yet, in the distance, something moved. Veyra had not noticed at first. Her body was tired from the journey, her muscles aching from the battle earlier, and the effort of dragging Rowan through the treacherous landscape had left her exhausted. But something caught her attention. A movement far ahead, a silhouette against the horizon, where the distant ridge met the valley floor. Her ears pricked up. It was the herd. The distant forms of wild mustangs appeared on the ridge, their dark shapes outlined against the fading light. The lead mare, Marla, could be seen at the forefront, the figure Veyra had once recognized so well. The sound of the herd's hooves in the snow reached Veyra's ears, and for a fleeting moment, she felt a glimmer of hope for Rowan, and perhaps for herself as well. But then, Rowan stirred. Weak, still struggling to remain upright, the foal's hoofs scraped the snow as it lifted its head. Rowan's voice, faint and barely above a whisper, called out to the herd, a soft whinny that was barely audible over the wind. But the sound carried across the open fields, reaching the ears of the mustangs. Veyra paused, her eyes narrowing as she observed the scene. The herd had stopped, all movement coming to an abrupt halt as they turned toward the sound of Rowan's cry. It was Marla who reacted first. The lead mare shifted uneasily, her nostrils flaring as she sniffed the air. She froze, her eyes scanning the distance, then narrowing as she seemed to recognize the faint scent that hung on the wind, the unmistakable smell of wolf. Veyra's chest tightened. She could feel the tension in the air, the hesitation in the herd's movements. Marla was hesitant, unwilling to cross the distance between them. Her gaze flickered between Rowan, the foal she had raised, and Veyra, standing a short distance away. Rowan called again, a bit stronger this time, as it struggled to rise, its legs buckling beneath it. The foal's small form moved weakly, but there was a light in its eyes now, an unmistakable recognition that it was, at last, close to home. Veyra remained motionless, standing apart, watching as the herd debated whether or not to approach. Her eyes remained on Marla, whose gaze was locked on her, then shifting to Rowan. The tension between the two mares was palpable, like a standoff in the wild. Marla took a few cautious steps forward, her body tense and wary. She was a mother first, but the smell of wolf on Rowan's fur was not something easily ignored. It was unnatural, and it made Marla hesitate. The bond between mother and child was undeniable, and yet Marla couldn't shake the primal fear that gnawed at her. A wolf's presence on her foal's fur was not something any of the herd could easily accept. Trust had to be earned, and Veyra had not yet proven that she could be trusted with Rowan, even though she had saved the foal. The herd shifted uneasily, and Marla took a step back, but her eyes never left Rowan. Rowan stood weakly, looking up at the herd, calling out again. The foal was pleading, desperate for recognition, for comfort, for home. It wasn't just a call for Marla. It was a call for acceptance, a plea to be reclaimed by its family, even though the circumstances of its return were far from normal. Marla's head swung from side to side, clearly conflicted. Veyra, standing just outside the herd's reach, could see the struggle in the mare's eyes. Would she come closer? Would she accept the foal, even with the mark of the wolf lingering on it? The hesitation seemed to stretch on forever. Veyra's mind raced. She couldn't change the fear in the herd's eyes. She couldn't undo the scent of danger that lingered around Rowan, and she certainly couldn't explain the bond that had formed between herself and the foal. But she had done what she thought was right. She had protected Rowan, and that was all she could do. Then, the moment came. Without warning, Marla took another step forward. It was hesitant, but it was a step nonetheless. She closed the distance, her nostrils flaring, her eyes locked on Rowan. Rowan's breath quickened, and for the first time since Veyra had met the foal, it seemed to strengthen. Marla approached the foal, her body slowly relaxing as she recognized her child. The familiar scent of her foal, the one she had nursed, the one she had cared for, broke through the haze of confusion and fear that had clouded her judgment. And then, as Marla reached Rowan, she stopped. There was a moment of stillness, of understanding, as the two of them stood face to face. The tension between predator and prey hung in the air, but instead of hostility, there was something more, something like a soft acceptance. Marla finally stepped forward and gently nudged Rowan with her nose, her body now relaxed. The reunion was quiet, almost sacred. Rowan, weak but determined, stumbled forward to meet her mother, a bond that had been severed and now, in this moment, was repaired. Veyra stood back, watching quietly. The battle wasn't hers to fight anymore. The foal had found its place again, in the arms of its mother. She had done her part, but now, it was time for her to disappear. With a final glance at the pair, Veyra turned away, her tail low. She knew she had given Rowan a chance. The foal had survived, and that was all that mattered. As the herd began to move, led by Marla, Veyra lingered on the edge of the field. She watched the foal walk away, now safely in the fold of its family, and for the first time, she felt the weight of her actions. She had defied instinct, and in doing so, had rewritten her own story. But as she turned to leave, she could feel the presence of the foal, the connection still lingering in the air. Was this truly the end? Or was something else, something larger, waiting just beyond the horizon? Veyra stepped back, her movements slow and deliberate, as she made her way to the edge of the field. She didn't turn to look at Rowan or the herd, she didn't need to. Her presence had already done its part, and now, the foal was with its mother. Veyra took a seat, her body sinking into the snow, her gaze steady and unyielding. She remained still, not threatening, not intruding, just waiting. The wind had picked up again, but it felt distant now, almost like background noise to a story that had already unfolded. Her amber eyes, once full of fire and hunger, were now calm, almost peaceful, as she observed the moment play out before her. Rowan, still weak, took a few hesitant steps toward Marla, its legs unsteady beneath it. The foal moved slowly, its movements awkward, but with an undeniable determination. Each step was a small victory, a small act of defiance against the cold, the pain, and the uncertainty that had haunted its every breath since the storm. Veyra's heart clenched as she watched the foal struggle, but there was something in her chest that eased. Rowan had found its way back. Back to family. Back to a place where it belonged. Marla watched the foal, her eyes wide, her body tense as she waited for Rowan to approach. And then, it happened. Rowan took the final step toward its mother. The gap between them closed, and without hesitation, Marla rushed forward, her body quivering with emotion. The reunion was nothing short of legendary. Marla nuzzled Rowan's trembling body, her warm breath mingling with the cold air. The foal responded, pushing its face into Marla's, seeking warmth, comfort, and reassurance. The emotional weight of the moment, the long separation, the uncertainty, the fear of the past hours, was released in a single, perfectly timed embrace. Veyra watched from the distance, her gaze unwavering. She had done her part, and now, it was time to let go. A moment of silence passed. The wind howled in the distance, but in this small, sacred space, time seemed to slow down. Veyra remained seated, her body still and quiet, the only movement the faint rise and fall of her chest as she breathed in the cold air. Then, Marla did something Veyra hadn't expected. The lead mare, still with Rowan nestled against her side, lifted her head slowly and turned toward Veyra. It wasn't out of anger, nor out of the fury that Veyra had expected. Instead, Marla's gaze was calm, filled with something else entirely. In that look, there was gratitude, a quiet acknowledgement of what Veyra had done. It was not the recognition of a predator, nor a victim, but of something more profound, a moment of respect. Marla didn't approach Veyra, nor did she growl or show aggression. She simply nodded, her head bowing ever so slightly toward the wolf, her eyes never leaving Veyra's. It was a nod of understanding, a silent recognition of what had passed between them. Veyra had chosen to save Rowan, and in doing so, she had forged a bond that would transcend the laws of nature, the laws of predator and prey. Veyra's heart skipped a beat. The intensity of the moment threatened to overwhelm her, but she didn't flinch. She sat still, allowing Marla's unspoken words to wash over her. Veyra's gaze softened as she met Marla's eyes. No words were spoken between them, but it was as though the world itself had paused, waiting for something more to unfold. Then, in a final act of quiet grace, Veyra stood up. The snow beneath her paws seemed to embrace her as she moved away, her body slow and weary, but with a new sense of peace she had never known before. She wasn't a predator anymore, and she wasn't prey either. She was just a wolf, now freed from the burdens of her past, having made a choice that had forever altered the course of her life. As Veyra moved away, she glanced back at the mother and foal, Marla and Rowan, still standing together. Rowan was safe. That was all that mattered. The herd was moving, the distant figures of the wild mustangs slowly gathering together, their instincts urging them to move on. But there was a new bond between them now, one that was formed not out of survival, but of something deeper, something that could never be explained by simple instincts. Veyra continued to move away, leaving behind the reunion she had fought so hard to make possible. She didn't look back, not because she didn't want to, but because she knew that what had happened between them was something no one could ever understand. But as the moonlight broke through the clouds, casting a silvery glow over the basin, Veyra felt a warmth she had not felt in a long time. She was still alone, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel empty. As the wind picked up once more, Veyra's form disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind a quiet legacy, one that was written in the bond between a wolf and a foal, between predator and prey, and between the wild world and the choices we make. Veyra never looked back. As she walked away from the reunion, the frost beneath her paws seemed to disappear, swallowed by the darkness of the night. Rowan was safe now, with Marla, with the herd. The foal had found its place. And with that, Veyra's role in the foal's life had ended. The long road of solitude lay ahead, the same one she had traveled for so many years. The mountains loomed ahead, distant and foreboding. Veyra's silhouette merged with the darkness, fading into the cold, desolate wilderness. There were no goodbyes. There were no words. The wind howled as it always did, but this time, the howling didn't seem as loud. It was a sound she had grown used to, the sound of loneliness, of the wild, and of choices made that could never be undone. She had been a predator, a solitary hunter. But now, the line between survival and purpose had blurred. Veyra had done something unnatural, something that defied every instinct she had ever known. She had protected a foal, not out of hunger, not for survival, but because she had chosen to care. But Rowan's journey wasn't over, not by a long shot. The foal had now become something more than a small, helpless creature. Rowan, nursed by its mother, had found the strength to continue growing. The wound on its leg had healed, though a scar remained, a permanent mark of survival. But the scar wasn't just physical, it was a reminder, a mark that told the story of a life saved, of a bond that transcended the natural order. Rowan grew strong. Each day that passed brought new strength to the foal's legs, new purpose to its heart. But even as it grew, that scar never faded, and neither did the memory of its time with Veyra. The foal would never forget the wolf that had saved it, the wolf that had gone against all instinct to protect something so fragile. Rowan was not like the other young mustangs. There was a depth to its eyes, a wisdom in its gaze that set it apart. The other foals would run and play, carefree and wild, but Rowan always kept a distance. Its scarred leg, though healed, still carried a weight that the others could not understand. But Rowan wasn't alone. It had Marla, the mare who had raised it, loved it, protected it. And while Marla had given Rowan life, it was Veyra's choice that had given it a new purpose. The herd continued its travels across the vast, untamed lands of High Hollow Basin, its rhythm steady and determined. Rowan grew among them, learning the ways of the wild, but always with the memory of that night etched deep in its heart. The journey of survival was one Rowan now understood. But it was not just survival that defined it. It was the choices made, the bonds formed, the acts of compassion that would shape the path ahead. In the distance, standing atop a high ridge, Veyra looked down at the herd. The wind whipped through her fur, but she stood still, gazing down at the band of mustangs far below. She could see Rowan among them now, walking beside Marla, strong and resilient. The connection was there, the unspoken bond between predator and prey, between wolf and foal. Veyra didn't need to approach. She didn't need to call out to them. Her presence was enough, even from afar. As Rowan and the herd continued their journey, Veyra's gaze lingered for just a moment longer. There was no bitterness, no regret, only a quiet understanding. Veyra had done her part, and now it was time for Rowan to live the life it was meant to live, among the wild. And as Veyra turned away, disappearing into the shadows, a final thought lingered in her mind, the same thought that had haunted her since the day she made her choice. The question that had been with her all this time, the question that would never leave. Had she made the right choice? She didn't know. But in that moment, as she disappeared into the wilderness, Veyra found peace. Years passed in High Hollow Basin, and the landscape shifted subtly with the changing seasons. The winds howled, the storms came and went, and the wild mustangs continued to roam, free as they had always been. Rowan, now a strong young stallion, had grown into his own, his once fragile body now muscular and proud, carrying the legacy of both the wild herd and the wolf who had saved him. He had left behind the vulnerability of a foal, the scars on his leg barely visible beneath the layers of sweeping chestnut fur. But the memory of that winter night stayed with him, buried deep in his heart. Though Marla had raised him, and though the herd had become his family, there was something about Rowan's eyes that was different, something that set him apart. He often stood at the edge of the herd, his gaze distant, focused on the ridgelines in the distance. His instincts were sharp, and he had become a fierce protector of the herd. But even as he grew into a proud stallion, his eyes would sometimes stray, always toward the farthest ridges, where the wind blew cold and the earth was white. There, on the edge of the land, stood a figure. Veyra. The wolf had not changed much. Her fur had grown grayer, the once sharp edges of her features now softened by the passage of time. Her body was leaner now, the strength of youth fading, replaced by the quiet endurance of age. But still, she wandered alone, away from the wild packs that once called to her. The howl of the wolf was no longer heard in the valley. but the presence of Veyra lingered, like a ghost in the distance. Every now and then, Rowan would see her, standing atop a ridge, watching the herd from afar. She never came closer, never crossed the line that separated the wild predator from the wild Mustang. Her amber eyes would linger on the herd for a moment, her gaze locking onto Rowan, as if she could feel his presence, even from a distance. The stallion's heart would race every time he saw her, the memories of their brief, unexpected bond flashing in his mind. But he never moved toward her. Veyra never approached. She didn't hunt, not anymore. She simply watched, and then she would disappear back into the shadows of the wilderness. The herd never noticed her. They carried on with their own lives, grazing, running, living as mustangs always did. The bond between Rowan and the wolf was his secret, a quiet connection that neither the other horses nor the world itself could understand. Time went on. Rowan matured into a mighty stallion, leading the herd with the wisdom of a seasoned leader. He defended them from predators, kept them safe, and kept the peace between the wild and the unknown dangers that lurked beyond the horizon. But despite his strength, there was always a part of him that was quietly burdened, as if a piece of his heart was never fully present. He would stand on the edge of the herd, watching the distant ridgelines, and sometimes, just sometimes, he could swear he felt Veyra's presence. The silver wolf, the one who had chosen to save him, the one who had betrayed her instincts to protect him. The years stretched into a silent understanding between them. Veyra never approached. She did not seek Rowan. She did not seek the herd. She remained on the periphery, always watching, but never intervening. The bond that had once drawn them together had become a quiet memory, a bond unspoken, one that neither time nor space could erase. There were times when Rowan would feel the weight of her gaze from across the wide expanse of the land. Her amber eyes, always fixed on him. And though he had grown strong, though he had learned the ways of the wild, there were moments when he felt as though he were still a foal, still lost, still guided by an invisible thread. But Veyra never came closer. She remained a shadow on the ridge, a figure that was always there but never really a part of the world Rowan now inhabited. The wolf had made her choice, and Rowan had made his. They were both free, but they were also alone in ways that neither could fully explain. And so, the years passed. Rowan would grow older, becoming a legend among the mustangs, his scarred leg serving as a reminder of the moment he had been saved by the silver wolf. He would lead the herd through the seasons, protecting them, defending them, and guiding them through the harshest winters and the driest summers. He would raise his own foals, ensuring that the legacy of the wild mustangs would continue. But even as he grew, even as he thrived, there was always the presence of Veyra in the back of his mind, the wolf that had once been his protector, the wolf that had been both predator and savior. And then, one day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Veyra was no longer there. The shadows on the ridge were empty, and Rowan felt a strange emptiness in his chest, as though the last piece of his past had finally disappeared. Veyra had watched over him, silently, for years, but now, the wolf was gone. Rowan stood alone on the ridge that overlooked the valley, the herd grazing peacefully below. He turned his gaze toward the distant horizon, where the wind howled, and the mountains rose tall and silent. The world had changed, and so had he. The wolf that had once saved him had now faded into the past, but Rowan's legacy was just beginning. The mark of the silver wolf, the bond they shared, would remain in his heart forever, a reminder that sometimes, even in the wildest places, the most unexpected connections are the ones that truly define us. The legend of Veyra and Rowan spread quietly among the local horse communities, becoming a tale whispered among the elders around campfires, passed down like a sacred secret. It was a story so extraordinary, so defiant of nature's law, that most couldn't believe it. But those who did, they would speak of the silver wolf, the lone predator who chose to protect rather than consume, and Rowan, the Mustang Foal who had been saved against all odds. The legend grew, and in time, it became something even greater, something mythical. One day, during a stormy evening, when the wind howled through the canyon like a mournful cry, as Rowan grew into a powerful stallion, he led the herd with unwavering courage and strength, guiding them through every season. And one day, when a mountain lion dared to challenge a Mustang that had survived its darkest hour, the savage roar echoed through the valley, but those who heard it swore they heard something else too. A howl, eerily carried across the canyon, sweeping down from the ridgelines, like a protective embrace wrapping around the herd. That howl belonged to Veyra. Though she was no longer there, her spirit lingered. The legend lived on, not in instinct, but in every choice whispered through the winds of survival. The story of Veyra and Rowan teaches us a profound truth. It's not instinct that defines who we are. It's the choices we make, especially the ones made in the quiet, unseen moments. Veyra chose to protect, even when every fiber of her being told her to run. Rowan chose to rise, to fight, to survive, forging a bond that transcended nature's fiercest laws. In those fleeting moments, when no one was watching, when all hope seemed lost, their choices became a story powerful enough to change the world around them. The world may tell you that survival is everything, but it's what we choose to do. When no one is watching, when no one is judging, that defines who we truly are. If this story touched your heart, if you felt the weight of choices made out of pure compassion, then join us in honoring this incredible tale of sacrifice and courage. Leave a comment below. What did Veyra's act of compassion teach you? Which do you believe is stronger, instinct or the choices we make? Don't forget to like this video, share it with those who need to hear it, and subscribe to Gallop of Glory, so you never miss a story that will make you reflect on the true journey of the soul. Thank you for being part of this journey.